What if everything you believed about your family was a lie? Not a small lie, one so devastating that it could tear your entire world apart. What if the man you called Dad, the man you looked up to your whole life, wasn't your real father? Would you confront the truth or bury it, hoping it would go away? Now imagine that truth is tied to something forbidden, a betrayal that began long before you were born. A secret so dangerous that when it came to light, lives were destroyed. Trevor Daniels didn't take a DNA test to uncover heartbreak. He did it out of curiosity. Like so many people, he wanted to learn more about where he came from. But instead of finding his roots, he found the truth. And that truth wasn't just about his ancestry, it was about his mother, his father, and his uncle. How do you forgive someone who kept something like that from you? This isn't just a story about discovering the past. It's about how one lie can grow until it leaves destruction in its path. Would you take a DNA test if you knew it could cost you everything you thought you knew about yourself? For Trevor, one choice led to betrayal, rage, and tragedy. What would you do if your family's darkest secret came knocking at your door? Because in this story, the truth wasn't just uncovered, it ended in heartbreak, gunfire, and devastation. If you're captivated by true stories that reveal the unexpected depths of human nature, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest uploads. Trevor Daniels was the kind of man everyone admired, a respected police officer in Florida, known for his calm leadership and dedication to the community. He wasn't just a man in uniform, he was a role model. His neighbors knew him by name, and his colleagues respected his instinct and drive. He came from what seemed like the perfect family. His father, James Daniels, was the kind of man who held the family together with unwavering strength and quiet wisdom. His mother, Vanessa, was warm, loving, and devoted. Their family gatherings were filled with laughter and stories, traditions passed down through generations. Trevor had always felt lucky to have parents who loved each other so deeply. It was an ordinary day at the precinct, the kind filled with coffee breaks and casual conversations. Trevor and a few of his colleagues were gathered around a table, swapping stories. One officer mentioned how his cousin's DNA test revealed they were related to someone famous. Another chimed in about discovering a family branch that no one knew existed. The room buzzed with laughter and curiosity. Trevor leaned back, smiling. I've always wondered if Grandma's stories were true. She used to say we had roots in West Africa and a little bit of Native American blood. Maybe it's time I find out for myself. The idea lingered in his mind long after the conversation ended. It wasn't just about curiosity. It was about legacy. Later that week, with a few spare hours and nothing pressing on his schedule, he decided to order the DNA kit. The process felt easy enough. Spit in the tube, seal it, and send it off. As he sealed the package and placed it in the mailbox, there was a quiet excitement. What stories would my DNA tell? He wasn't expecting much, just a confirmation of the tales he'd grown up with. A fun way to connect to his roots. After all, everyone was doing it. What harm could come from learning more about who you are? But Trevor was about to uncover something that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about his life. The email came early on a quiet morning. Trevor reached for his phone, blinking at the notification from the DNA testing company. His results were ready. He sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, heart humming with anticipation. The app loaded slowly, each second dragging. Finally, the screen opened, revealing his ancestry breakdown: West African, 62%. No surprise there. He scrolled further, a small trace of Native American, just like Grandma said. He smiled, satisfied that the family stories were holding up. But then his eyes moved down to the next section, the section marked paternal line. His smile faded. The results stared back at him, unblinking. His paternal DNA didn't match the Daniels lineage. This must be a mistake, right? Trevor rubbed his eyes and refreshed the page. The same data appeared again, clear as day. No, that doesn't make sense. The coffee grew cold in his hands as questions flooded his mind. If James Daniels isn't my father, then who is? He thought of his childhood memories, the long talks with his dad, the way James would sit him down and share wisdom passed from father to son. All of it felt like a cruel trick now. Trevor's pulse quickened as the confusion gave way to a darker thought. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why was this hidden from me? The app closed, but the questions remained, each one louder than the last. Trevor wasn't just searching for answers anymore. He was searching for the truth. Trevor's childhood home was the same as it had always been, warm, inviting, filled with memories of family dinners and quiet Sunday afternoons. But today, it felt different. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. The familiar creak of the floorboards beneath his feet seemed louder than usual. Vanessa was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of stew. Trevor stood in the doorway, silent for a moment, watching her. But the weight in his chest was unbearable. He couldn't pretend, not anymore. "Mom, we need to talk." Vanessa turned, her smile fading as she saw the look on his face. She wiped her hands with a dishcloth and walked toward him. "What's wrong, baby?" Trevor didn't sit. His voice was steady but sharp. "Why does my DNA say I'm not Dad's son?" Vanessa froze. The dishcloth slipped from her hands to the floor. What are you talking about?" "I took a DNA test. It doesn't match Dad's family. Who is my real father?" Her hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the counter to steady herself. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Trevor stepped forward, his voice rising. "Who is he? Why didn't you tell me? I deserve to know the truth." Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, shoulders heavy with guilt. "I didn't know how to tell you." Trevor clenched his fists, trying to contain the storm inside him. "Tell me what?" Vanessa took a shaky breath. "It was Marcus. Your Uncle Marcus. We were together in college." The name hit Trevor like a punch to the gut. Marcus, the younger brother of the man he'd called father. The man who had always been a quiet presence at family gatherings, never drawing too much attention to himself. Trevor's mind raced as Vanessa continued, her voice trembling. "We were in love, Trevor. Your uncle was my first love. But life pulled us apart, and by the time we found each other again, it was too late. I was already married to James." Trevor's breath caught in his throat. "Why didn't you tell Dad? Why didn't you tell me?" Vanessa wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I couldn't. I didn't want to destroy everything. Your father, he loved you so much. And I didn't want you to grow up in a broken home." Trevor's vision blurred with tears of his own. His entire life felt like a fragile house of cards, and with Vanessa's confession, it had all come crashing down. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, suffocating. Trevor stared at his mother, searching her face for something, answers, reassurance, anything that could make sense of the chaos in his heart. "You should have told me." Vanessa reached for his hand, but Trevor pulled away, stepping back as if the distance could shield him from the pain. "Why did you lie?" Her voice cracked as she whispered. "Because I was afraid of losing you." Trevor shook his head, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The truth had finally been spoken, but it wasn't the kind of truth that set anyone free. It was the kind that shattered everything. Vanessa's story began long before Trevor was born, back when she was a bright-eyed college student filled with dreams. That's where she met Marcus, the man who changed her life forever. He wasn't just handsome, he was thoughtful, ambitious, and kind. He made her laugh when exams felt overwhelming and knew how to quiet her fears with a simple look. They became inseparable, sharing their hopes, fears, and dreams of building a future together. They'd spend hours walking across campus, making promises about the life they'd build. Small house, kids, and everything simple but beautiful. For Vanessa, Marcus wasn't just a boyfriend, he was her future. But sometimes life has its way of tearing apart even the strongest bonds. One rainy evening, Marcus was supposed to meet Vanessa for dinner, but he never showed. She waited under the street lamp until the rain soaked through her coat. The next morning, she learned the truth. Marcus had been in a terrible car accident. The details were scarce. All Vanessa knew was that Marcus was gone. His friends had no answers, and she was left with nothing but questions and an empty ache in her chest. Days turned into weeks, then months. Vanessa wrote letters, made phone calls, and tracked down anyone who might know where he'd gone. But there was nothing. Eventually, she stopped searching, not because she stopped loving him, but because the grief felt like quicksand. She was sinking, and the only way to survive was to move forward. Vanessa graduated, started a new job, and tried to piece her life back together. But she never forgot Marcus, the sound of his laughter, the way his hand fit perfectly into hers. He was her first love, and we all know how hard it is to forget your first. Years later, Vanessa met James Daniels, a man who was everything stable and kind. He was generous, successful, and treated her like a queen. He loved her deeply, and though she could never quite explain it, being with James felt safe. Their wedding day was a grand affair, flowers everywhere, music filling the church, and friends and family gathered to celebrate. Vanessa stood at the altar, dressed in white, exchanging vows with a man who adored her. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe again. But then came the moment that would change everything. After the ceremony, James smiled and said, "I've been meaning to introduce you to someone special." Vanessa's heart stopped as a familiar figure stepped forward. It was Marcus. Her world tilted as she stared into the eyes she thought she'd never see again. The man who had disappeared from her life without warning was now standing in front of her, as her husband's younger brother. James's voice was warm, unaware of the silent storm brewing inside Vanessa. "Marcus has been through so much. He was in a terrible accident back in college. It took him years to recover. But he's here now. He's family." Marcus looked just as stunned as Vanessa. The pain in his eyes mirrored her own. He hadn't abandoned her. He'd been fighting to survive. But the timing was cruel. Vanessa had just exchanged vows. The life she dreamed of with Marcus was gone, replaced by a new life she had promised to someone else. The weight of that moment stayed with Vanessa for years, a constant ache buried beneath layers of routine and responsibility. She wondered if things could have been different if she had waited a little longer. Would you have waited for your first love, or would you have moved on? Vanessa never answered that question for herself. Fate had answered it for her. Vanessa tried to push the memories of Marcus away. She told herself that what they had was in the past, that chapter of her life was closed. She was married now, building a life with James. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself, some connections don't just fade with time. Every family gathering, every dinner at James's parents' house, she'd see Marcus across the room. Their eyes would meet for the briefest moment. But in those seconds, the years between them disappeared. She wasn't Mrs. Daniels, she was still the young girl who waited in the rain, hoping he'd show up. Marcus felt it too. He avoided speaking to her when others were around. But when they found themselves alone in the same room, the air thickened with everything unsaid. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened. The first time they met in secret, it was innocent, just a conversation, an attempt to make sense of everything. But conversations led to long walks. Long walks led to quiet embraces. And those embraces turned into stolen moments neither of them could resist. Vanessa and Marcus knew what they were doing was wrong, but the pull between them was stronger than any vow or promise. What they had was rekindled like a fire that had been waiting for just the right spark. James traveled often for work, leaving Vanessa home alone for weeks at a time. He trusted her completely, never once suspecting that his wife's loneliness was being filled by the one person who should have been furthest from her heart. The affair grew deeper with each passing month. Vanessa and Marcus were careful, never careless, never obvious. But the more time they spent together, the harder it became to separate their feelings from their everyday lives. Then came the news that changed everything. Vanessa was pregnant. James was overjoyed. He had always dreamed of being a father, and Vanessa played along, letting herself believe that the life growing inside her belonged to her husband. It was easier that way, to convince herself that James was the father and that their family could stay intact. But Marcus knew. From the moment Vanessa told him she was expecting, he knew. "That's my child." The words weighed heavily on him, though he never said them out loud. He had been silent for so long, holding back everything he felt for the sake of peace. And now, he found himself holding back again, for the sake of Vanessa, for the sake of the family. The affair didn't stop with the pregnancy. If anything, it grew even stronger. Vanessa felt more vulnerable than ever, and she found comfort in Marcus's presence. She used her pregnancy as an excuse to be close to him. "I need to feel your touch," she whispered more than once. While James was away on business, Marcus would visit. It wasn't just about love, it was about the connection that had never been severed. Even after their son was born, they continued their affair behind closed doors. Always careful. Always hidden. Years passed, and eventually Marcus got married. His wife was sweet and trusting, and she loved him fiercely. It should have been the end of everything. He told Vanessa that it was time to stop, that he needed to focus on his wife and build his own life. Vanessa felt the weight of his words like a blow to the chest. After everything they had been through, every secret, every lie, he was walking away. "How can you leave now, after all we've done? After everything I gave up?" Marcus avoided her eyes. "I have to. It's over." It was selfish. After years of betraying his brother and building a hidden life with Vanessa, Marcus was choosing to move on, leaving her with the pieces of a broken heart. Do you think Vanessa really loved James? Or was she always in love with Marcus? It's a question with no easy answer. Because sometimes, love isn't simple. It's messy, complicated, and full of impossible choices. And Vanessa had made her choice long ago, even if she could never say it out loud. Trevor Daniels sat in the living room, staring blankly at the family portraits on the wall. Each frame told a story he had believed in for his entire life, a story that now felt like a cruel lie. His father's smiling face beamed back at him in every photo: fishing trips, birthday parties, his graduation day. James Daniels had always been there, guiding him, teaching him what it meant to be a man. Trevor could still hear his father's voice. "No matter what, you're my son. You make me proud." But now, those words felt like a memory wrapped in betrayal. Trevor pressed his hands to his face, trying to hold back the flood of emotions crashing over him. His entire identity felt like it had been ripped away. Who am I if I'm not his son? He remembered the moments they had shared, the quiet talks on the porch, James's advice before his first day at the academy, the way he called him champ after every small victory. Trevor had spent his life trying to live up to the man James was. But now, every memory felt tainted, tangled in a web of deception. Vanessa's voice broke the silence. "Trevor." She took a step closer, her face stained with tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." Trevor's head snapped up, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and rage. "You didn't want to hurt me? How could you keep this from me? From him? Do you know what you've done?" Vanessa clutched her chest, as though the weight of his words was too much to bear. "I loved both you and your father." Her voice cracked under the weight of her guilt. "James loved you as his own from the moment you were born. And Marcus, he loved you too, in his own way. But I couldn't tell anyone. I didn't want to destroy our family." Trevor stood, his breathing ragged. "Family? Do you call this a family? Everything I knew was built on lies." Vanessa reached out for him, desperate to bridge the widening chasm between them. "Please, you have to understand. I was young. I made mistakes. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped trying to protect you." Trevor's gaze softened for a moment as he stared at the woman who had raised him. But the ache in his chest remained, heavier than ever. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Vanessa took another step forward. "You're still the same man you've always been. James may not have been your biological father, but he was your dad, in every way that mattered." Trevor's shoulders slumped under the weight of the truth. The betrayal was suffocating. The memories were still there, but they didn't feel the same anymore. In that moment, it wasn't just the truth about his father that broke him, it was the realization that the people he trusted most had kept it from him. His life felt like a puzzle that had been pieced together wrong from the start. I needed the truth, Mom. And you took that from me. Vanessa's sobs filled the room as Trevor turned away, consumed by a pain he didn't know how to escape. The Daniels home was unusually quiet that night. The dining table was set with Vanessa's best china, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. She had spent the entire afternoon preparing dinner, her hands trembling with the weight of what was about to unfold. Marcus and his wife arrived first. Vanessa greeted them with a forced smile, trying to mask the unease simmering beneath the surface. Marcus looked at her with a mixture of caution and confusion, sensing that this wasn't an ordinary family dinner. James entered the room shortly after, his usual warmth filling the space. Trevor trailed behind, silent, his jaw tight, his emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. They sat around the table, the air thick with unspoken tension. Small talk filled the first few minutes. Marcus's work, James's latest business trip, and Trevor's recent cases at the precinct, but no one was truly listening. Everyone could feel it, the quiet storm building in the room. Vanessa, seated at the head of the table, cleared her throat. I thought it was time we all sat down together as a family. Trevor couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his fork down, the sound echoing in the tense silence. Family. Is that what this is? Let's talk about how you've lied to me my entire life. James frowned, his confusion turning to concern. What are you talking about, son? Trevor turned to his mother, his voice rising. Go ahead, Mom. Tell him. Tell him the truth about who I really am. Vanessa's face turned pale, her hands clutching the edges of the table. Trevor, please, not like this. But he didn't stop. Why don't you tell Dad that I'm not his son, that Marcus is my real father? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. James's face twisted in disbelief. What? That's not true. Tell me that's not true, Vanessa. Vanessa couldn't speak. Her silence was the answer James didn't want, but already knew. He looked at Marcus, his younger brother, who sat frozen, his face etched with guilt. Marcus, is this true? Marcus lowered his head, unable to meet James's eyes. The betrayal was written all over his face. James's breathing grew labored, his chest rising and falling as he struggled to process the unthinkable. You're telling me the son I raised, my pride, my legacy, was never mine? Trevor tried to speak, but James held up a trembling hand. Don't say anything. James's face contorted in pain as he clutched his chest. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor. Vanessa screamed, rushing to his side. James! Oh my God, James! Trevor stood frozen, his anger replaced by horror as he watched the man who had raised him take his final breaths. Marcus knelt beside his brother, shouting for someone to call an ambulance, but it was too late. James Daniels, the man who had held the family together, was gone. The room descended into chaos. Vanessa's wails filled the air as she cradled James's lifeless body. Marcus's wife stood in shock, tears streaming down her face. Trevor took a step back, his entire body trembling. The man he had called Dad was gone, and it was his truth that had killed him. The weight of the moment crushed him as he stared at the devastation he had unleashed. The perfect family he had believed in was shattered, and there was no going back. The room was in chaos, Vanessa sobbing over James's body, Marcus frozen in place, and Marcus's wife covering her mouth in disbelief. But Trevor's world had gone silent. The sounds of crying, gasps, and shouts all faded as he stared at the man lying lifeless on the floor, the only man who had ever called him son. His heart pounded as the rage he had fought to contain finally boiled over. He clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. His vision blurred with a mixture of fury and pain. He looked at Vanessa, her face twisted in grief, and something inside him snapped. "You did this." Vanessa raised her tear-streaked face, confused by the coldness in his voice. "Trevor, please don't. You destroyed everything. You lied to him. You lied to me. You killed him with your secrets." Vanessa shook her head desperately. "I was trying to protect you. I never wanted any of this." Trevor's breathing grew heavier, his mind clouded with betrayal and heartbreak. Without thinking, he reached for his service weapon, the weight of the cold metal in his hand grounding him in his rage. Marcus stepped forward, his hands raised in surrender. "Trevor, stop. Don't do this." Vanessa's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. "Trevor, no." Trevor's voice cracked as he raised the gun. "You ruined everything." The sound of the gunshot echoed through the room. Vanessa's body crumpled to the floor, the life draining from her as Marcus's wife screamed in horror. Marcus lunged forward. "What have you done?" Trevor turned, his eyes empty, his face a mask of devastation. "You took my family. You took everything." Marcus froze, realizing there was nothing he could say to stop what was coming. Trevor pulled the trigger again, and Marcus fell beside Vanessa. His wife collapsed to her knees, unable to process the scene before her. The room went silent. The only sound was Trevor's shallow breathing as he stood amidst the bodies of the people who had shaped his life, for better and for worse. He dropped the gun to the floor with a hollow clang and reached for his phone. His hands were steady now, his voice eerily calm as he dialed 911. "It's done. I killed them. Come get me." He gave the address without hesitation and hung up. There was no panic, no fear, just an overwhelming sense of finality. He sank into a chair, staring at the devastation around him. The love, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it had all led to this moment. There was nothing left. The flashing red and blue lights appeared outside moments later, their sirens piercing the night. But inside, the house was silent. Trevor sat motionless, waiting for the end he knew he had sealed himself into. Officers entered cautiously, weapons drawn, unsure of what awaited them. Trevor was seated in the living room, his hands resting on his knees, his service weapon lying on the floor. His face was expressionless, his eyes hollow. The scene around him was gruesome, James's body still in the center of the room, Vanessa and Marcus lying lifeless near the dining table. Marcus's wife knelt beside her husband, sobbing uncontrollably. An officer approached Trevor carefully. "Daniels, stand up." Trevor nodded slowly and rose to his feet, raising his hands without resistance. The cold steel of the handcuffs locked around his wrists, but he didn't flinch. He kept his head low as they led him out of the house. The flashing lights outside cast shadows across his face as he was placed in the back of the squad car. The story spread like wildfire, every community filled with details of the tragedy. In the weeks leading up to the trial, the public was divided. Some viewed Trevor as a man driven to madness by betrayal, while others saw him as a trained officer who let rage dictate his actions. The courtroom was packed when the trial began. Trevor sat silently, dressed in a dark suit, flanked by his defense team. He didn't look at the crowd, his eyes stayed fixed ahead, as if the weight of the past was too much to bear. His defense attorney spoke with passion. Trevor Daniels was not in his right mind. Years of deceit, a foundation of lies, all of it came crashing down on him in a single moment. He didn't plan this. He was a man drowning in betrayal. The prosecution, however, was unrelenting. Trevor Daniels was a trained officer of the law. He understood the consequences of using deadly force. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was premeditated. He made a choice. He aimed that gun, and he pulled the trigger. Witnesses took the stand, friends, former colleagues and neighbors, each painting their version of Trevor. Some spoke of his kindness and dedication, while others questioned how a man so trusted could commit such an unspeakable act. Marcus's wife testified, tears streaming down her face, recounting the moment she watched her husband fall to the floor. He didn't deserve to die. None of them did. The jury sat in silence, absorbing every word, their expressions unreadable. The weight of the case was undeniable. The courtroom was silent as the judge returned with the verdict. Trevor rose to his feet, his face unreadable. On the count of first-degree murder, guilty. On the count of second-degree murder, guilty. The final words rang through the courtroom like a final blow. The judge's voice was steady but heavy. Trevor Daniels, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gasps echoed through the room. Some cried softly, while others nodded in quiet agreement. Trevor remained still, as though he had expected this outcome all along. The judge's gavel fell, signaling the end of the trial. As the officers approached to escort him out, Trevor turned to face the courtroom for the first time. His voice was low but clear. I wasn't just betrayed. I was destroyed. The room held its breath as he was led away. Trevor's cell became a quiet reflection of everything he had lost. His father's voice echoed in his memories, and the faces of his mother and Marcus haunted him. The world outside moved on, but for Trevor Daniels, time stood still, a life frozen in the aftermath of love, lies, and irreversible choices. Trevor Daniels's story is not just about a tragedy. It's a story that forces us to confront difficult questions about family, love, and betrayal. Was Trevor justified in his anger? His life was built on a lie he never asked for, and when that truth came crashing down, it shattered everything he believed. But does betrayal ever excuse violence? Could he have walked away instead of letting rage consume him? Should Vanessa and Marcus have told the truth earlier? Would honesty from the start have spared everyone this pain, or would it have only sped up the devastation? Is there ever a right time to reveal a secret like that? Would you forgive your mother for something like this? Imagine standing in Trevor's shoes, discovering the woman who raised you had kept a truth that changed your entire life. Could you ever look at her the same way again? Would you be able to forgive, or would the betrayal be too great to bear? There's no easy answer. Family can be the strongest bond we know, but it can also become the deepest wound. DNA tests can reveal the truth, but is the truth always worth knowing? It's a question only you can answer. Some truths bring peace, but others bring chaos. Would you take that risk? Would you ever take a DNA test if you knew it could uncover something this devastating? We want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Trevor's shoes? Would you have confronted your family? Would you have forgiven, or walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who loves true crime stories. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, and stay safe.